that's life. That's what all the people say. You're riding high in April, shot down in May. But I know I'm gonna change that tune when I'm back on top in June. I said that's life.
Today we have Tony Diamore with us. We've been hunting him for since this began. He's finally here.
Thanks for having me.
Oh, for sure. So how did you get into car audio? What was your first exposure? Was it because you were going down that path with school, or did you just happen upon it, or?
No, I think it was like the love of it for when I heard my first system, you know. So I was probably 12 or 13 years old, and I had an older cousin. He had a 67 Camaro, and I remember he wasn't an installer himself, but he liked good sound in this. And I remember I believe he took it to the specialist in Tucson, just dropped it off there and let them go nuts on it. And it was awesome. It was like fully active, tri-amped with Rockford Fosgate punch, like 45, 75, 150. We're talking, this is like early 80s, mid 80s.
Nice.
And yeah, so I remember when he got it done, he asked me to come check it out, you know, and I sat in there and he played it for me and it just blew my mind. I mean, there was, in the 80s, that wasn't a common thing to experience. And I was hooked.
What was your first car, and did you put a system in your first car?
So, yeah, I didn't start off in the audio industry. I was a mechanic, actually. My first car was a 75 Firebird.
Nice.
And, yeah, I wanted the system in it, of course. But, you know, this car was like $1,400 car that I bought with probably paper route money or something that I had been saving up. And then I worked in a gas station for a long time, pumping gas and doing light repairs and stuff. Those old gas stations that had a garage, you know. And so I didn't have a lot of money to spend on the system, but I managed to get a Alpine head unit from a kind of a shady source, so I don't know where it came from. I think I got acoustic amplifier back when I think MTX owned them or something. It was like their low brand maybe. And I was running some door speakers. That's all I had. And then there was like one of these blowout clearance at the state fairgrounds kind of events, you know, and I went there and I think I picked up 4 pile 10-inch woofers and a Majestic amplifier. And I cut holes in the back deck with like a jigsaw, you know, and I mean, it was booty, but it worked. I have 410s free air on the back deck. That Majestic, I played it until it burned up and ended up taking it apart just because I wanted to see what was in it. And there was a trace on the circuit board that had burned up. So I just soldered a piece of wire and soldered the trace back together, and it fired right up, started working again. I thought that was pretty cool.
Back in business.
But yeah, I was a mechanic, and that's what was in the
So
car.
let's take a few steps back, because I feel like already the engineer in you has come out at this point. You know, at that point, if you're just resoldering a trace together, there's something in you that is more mechanically inclined than most, right? So where did this come from, and how did that start?
That was just, I guess, who I was since birth, really. I mean, I was always taking apart things in the house and probably destroying more things than not. Wanted to know how everything worked, you know. So anything I could, I would take it apart, and I wanted to know what made it tick. Literally, I wanted to know how this watch ticked one time. I received as a gift, and I remember smashing it with a hammer so I could like see inside of it. Kind of got in trouble for that one. So yeah, I was always just interested in how things work. I did know that I wanted to study engineering, but I didn't have the money to go to college at 18. And my parents made just enough money to not allow me to get financial aid because I lived with them.
Dagger.
But not enough to get me to go to school. So So I was in the community college system for years, taking a class here, taking a class there. I just hated it. I called it high school with ashtrays. It's kind of like what that place felt like. And wasted a lot of time there in those community colleges until I finally got serious about going to college when I was in my late 20s, and I quit being a mechanic and got financial aid and went to ASU full time. Just dove in, sold my car, sold my Snap-on toolbox, sold all the things, and just kind of said, I'm doing this for real now. I've been wasting 9 years at the junior college messing around, so it's time to go.
Wow. And so how many years did you spend in college, and what all did you know the path when you started, or did it?
I remember starting the electrical engineering program at ASU. The first math class that counted towards my degree was Calculus for Engineers 1, which is about 5 or 6 classes up from like college algebra. So I had a lot of classes to take to even get one that counted towards the degree. But I stayed in full time until I guess until I was almost a junior, and I got hired at Rockford. And I planned on trying to continue the program while I was at Rockford, part-time, until it was finished. But what I didn't really realize is that when you get into some of the higher classes, it might be offered once, at 1 p.m. on Tuesdays and Thursdays. And I'm at work. I can't. They wouldn't let me do that. And this is before the days of online school and that kind of thing. So I ended up just stopping. And at that point, I think I have maybe 70 or 80 units or something like that.
And what year was that you got the job at Rockford?
2000.
And what was the position?
Oh, so that's a good one. So when I first started at Rockford, the girl that I was dating had a friend who had a husband that worked in production engineering there. And she knew I was interested in audio, and she said that she was going to talk to this guy, and I was really excited about that because if I back up for a minute, while I was going to school and I was running out of money and I decided I wanted a job, all right, I needed to get one. I had one of those like car audio annual magazine, like the annual edition that has the products. And in there was like the list of every company in car audio, pages and pages of companies with phone numbers. And I literally sat on the balcony of my apartment calling everyone that had a phone number. And all the ones that didn't, I wrote them letters and said, I'm looking for you. And I got a couple calls back, but nothing worked out. So the thing with Rockford happened through a friend. And so he worked in production engineering. He said, yeah, come in and got to talk to this guy. His name was Wade Fairborn. That's the guy that got me into the game. He was the production engineering manager there. And so I started there in production engineering, basically fixing the robots and maintaining the robots that built the circuit boards.
Wow.
What's actually called the surface mount placement equipment. So these high-speed robots that literally put the little parts onto the circuit board, and the whole production line that finishes that process. So I worked there on the third shift, 10 p.m. to 6 in the morning, making sure the production lines run. And I think I did that for about a year until I started seeing some of the amps come down the production line with little issues and things. And I started finding schematics and wanted to know why they were doing this or that. And getting really interested in the design. And my boss, Wade Fairborn, he knew that I had this this design engineering desire. And there was a product, it's called the Link Meter. You guys remember this thing? It went inside of the punch link.
Oh, yeah, in between the two amps, yeah.
Yeah, and it had a little voltmeter, 7-segment display, and then a little like output indicator, little LEDs that would go with the music to the So that project had come down from the new product development team to design engineering. And design engineering said, no, we can't do that. We don't have time for that. Or that's too, we can't do it for the price, or whatever their excuse was, they couldn't do it. And somehow my boss in production engineering got a hold of this document, brought it to me and said, could you make this? And I looked at it and said, yeah, I'm pretty sure I could make that. And he said, how long do you think it would take you? And I said, I don't know. I can probably have a working prototype, maybe tomorrow. And he was like, you do that and we're going to talk. So I stayed up all night and built one. And it looked crazy because I didn't have a circuit board. I didn't have time to make a circuit board, and I didn't know how to make circuit boards. I didn't know how to do circuit board layout at that time. So I had hand wired, each connection, and built this little thing and brought it in. This Frankenstein, looked like a bowl of spaghetti with all these white wires everywhere, and it worked. And he took it to design engineering and said, "I thought you guys couldn't do this," because there was some like battle between production engineering and design engineering. Because things would not work in production engineering, and they'd have to go to those guys, and they blame it on them, and Yeah. So yeah, that's what happened. So after that, I got hired into design engineering eventually, like pretty soon after that.
And so what other projects or that you can talk about? I don't know what you can talk about.
Yeah, sure. So I guess he went over there and talked to the design engineering manager and said, "Hey, you guys need this guy on your side of the fence. You should hire him over here." So I got in there, and when I first started in design engineering, they assigned me to a veteran engineer basically as his bitch. And so Mark Albers was his name. He was a Hafler engineer, design engineer. Super smart dude. Very engineer-like, not just a little robotic and very logic driven guy. But he was basically one of the first mentors I had there. So yeah, I was testing things for him, prototypes that he was testing. And I didn't know what I was doing. And I was, blowing things up, and sorry, Mark, I was trying to test this or that. And, it blew up. What do you mean it blew up? Well, it blew up. You blew it up, like, how'd you blow it up? What'd you do? And so there was a lot of, there's some hard knocks there, but I learned a lot from that guy. He was a smart guy. And then of course the other guy in engineering at that time was Jim Strickland, who we just lost a couple years back, and genius guy. You couldn't ask him anything unless you had the time, though. I mean, if you had enough time. I was going to use the example of the clock, but you ask him what time it is, and you're going to get the whole history of the clock. But yeah, he was awesome. So anyways, I worked under Mark Albers for a couple years, maybe until like 2003. We started designing the 2004 line of product, and they let me jump in and start designing stuff for that series of 2004 and up.
And mostly amplifier based.
Yeah, so I was doing the punch and power lines. I believe I was responsible for the whole analog signal processing portion, or the preamp portion. So all the way from basically the RCAs to the core of the output section. And I was really interested in doing that because at that time, Rockford had these really weird crossovers that were not a textbook crossover. They weren't Linkwitz Riley. They weren't Butterworth. They were kind of bullshit. I mean, they worked and they sounded okay, but they had their own sound, and it wasn't. I don't think it was made to be that way. They just were trying to conserve on how many segments of a potentiometer you have to use, because if you want a crossover that's 12 dB, you need 2 segments. And so if it's a 2-channel amp, you need a 4-segment pot. You want a 24 dB crossover, which is what Power had. You need an 8-segment potentiometer, and they're long. They take up a lot of space. They're expensive, this and that. So they kind of had this circuit where the pot only worked on like 12 dB of the 24 dB crossover. So you got like this really kind of funky slope. Anyways, I hated it. So I redesigned all that stuff, all the bass boost. I didn't like how that worked. That was That was weird. If you didn't have it plugged in, the amp was like too flat, kind of had like a bass cut almost. So for the installers that would put these amps in cars and then throw the bass boost in their toolbox, the amps didn't sound right. So I set out to fix that. The bass boost also would like shift with frequency, so the boost would be mainly like 25 hertz until you started turning up the gain, and the curve would kind of do this, instead of just this. So all that stuff I redesigned on the 04, the linking system on the Power Series stuff. I think after that project was in production, I started messing around with ideas for the T15 KW.
Yeah. And how long did that process take to come up from a thought in your head to the first breadboard or first working sample? How long did that take?
Like I've been so busy these last years that I don't get to relive these moments. So this is kind of fun explaining or talking about this. So Rockford used to have this like company sound off for employees every year. And I had won it every year that I had entered it. Just because I had a car, I bought this Datsun 810 station wagon. I used to be a Nissan mechanic after the gas station. I was a master Nissan tech, so I liked Nissans. I had a Nissan daily driver, newer car that I ended up crashing it. And while it was being repaired, I needed something to get to work. Found this old station wagon that didn't run for $400, fixed it on the guy's driveway and drove it off. So I had this piece of garbage laying around, but it was a station wagon. You could fold the seats down. It was huge, so I would just build a box and fill the whole, back of the car. It was like a wall without a wall. And anyways, I had maybe like 4 BD1000s one year, and then like 8 BD1000s the next year, and then the BD1500s came out, so I had like 8 BD1500s. I always have 415s in it. That's all I could fit on the face of this thing. So now comes the next year where I have to like beat the score from the year before, and I know other people are going to bring the heat and stuff. So I kind of wanted to make something different. I wanted to get more power. And I knew that like the power supply is the limitation of these amplifiers, not really the output section. You can just make that bigger and bigger and it's fine, but the power supply gets squirrely. So somehow I got a bunch of motorcycle batteries, or like the size of a motorcycle battery. I guess I had 12 of them. I put them all in series and then center tapped the ground. So I ended up with like, plus and minus 70 volts or something on either end. And I got the Power 1500, like when the power amplifiers got huge, those big surfboard ones. I took those ones were convenient because they had the output section on one side, and then there was like a heatsink wall, and the power supply was on the other. So I was able to take the output sections out and then connect those to my batteries, straight plus and minus 70 volts into the rails. I don't know. I just wanted to get even crazier, so I made like a liquid cooled. Like some friends helped me weld up some aluminum square tubing, and we bolted all the FETs to that and ran antifreeze through it and had ice. We had like a coolant reservoir, like a overflow reservoir for like a radiator, where we filled it with ice and we were pumping water through it and all this stuff. So I took that Frankenstein thing out there, and you needed a way to charge the batteries though, because obviously they would just die. So at that time we also had MB Court amplifiers, and we had those really kind of high-end Class A, B ones, and those happen to have a fully regulated power supply, so you could just set the power supply output at whatever voltage you wanted, and then it didn't matter what the input voltage was, you'd always get that on the output. And so like this is a perfect like battery charger. So I gutted one of those and turned that power supply into a battery charger, hooked up to my battery array, and I'd charge them up and disconnect it, and then I would go. So that year did really good. It did I think it did 156 dB It was enough to win then. And that kind of got this idea cooking in my head about, how could you make a real amp out of this? Obviously, you can't have a bunch of batteries inside your amp, which is funny because now
Right.
it's a little different, but
Nowadays.
yeah.
So real quick, so that was 70 volts plus and minus,
Yeah.
and running into basically a 1500 watt amp that was actually putting out 1500 watts or more.
About 12,000 maybe.
Oh, geez.
Yeah, I had two of those 1502 boards, and then I bridged them. So I had two bridged 1502s. I had changed all the MOSFETs out to something that could handle a lot more power. And, I had to do some mods to them,
Yeah.
took the protection out, obviously, and things like this. But yeah, so after that, I don't know, some time went by, a few months or whatever, and I was thinking about this. My dad had a heart attack, and he was getting gas at a gas station. He just dropped. And he's still here today, but it nearly killed him. They had to shock him a ton of times. And I remember being in the ER in the waiting room. They had to do surgery, open heart surgery and stuff. And I'm sitting there in the waiting room, and I'm thinking, man, that defibrillator is a badass device. My dad's a 250-pound man, and how can this little thing with probably like a 9-volt battery in it lift a 250-pound guy off the ground with a shock? Like, how is that possible? You can take a 9-volt, lick it, whatever you want to do with it, and it's not gonna do that to you. So like, how's this working? So I started thinking about that and how it's like a capacitive discharge device, like like the old. I'm going to date myself here, but cameras that have flashes on them. You'd hear them charge up the flash, and boom, it's kind of the same thing. And I just kind of thought, this is exactly what you need for like a DB drag amp, because these guys that are building these cars and putting all these batteries and stuff in them, they're kind of building a NASCAR, and they're taking it to the drag strip.
It's a good analogy.
They're building a car that can go 500 miles, and you just need to go a quarter of a mile. So, all right, well, when I get out of here, I'm going to play with this idea. So I was thinking about it more, maybe told a few people at Rockford. And then I found this, or somebody, I think one of my coworkers came to me and said, hey, those caps that you were talking about, those new ultra caps, or those double layer carbon caps that are coming out. I found this company in Korea that makes some, and they're really awesome. They're used in like wind turbines, and and they connected me, and I ended up ordering some samples or something. So before that actually happened, though, I got to give a shout out to Mr. Ron Trout. He and a couple of others at Rockford, probably Bill Basor, Tony Candela, a few guys involved in this, helped me get some of those Rockford 100 farad caps that were full of those rectangular super caps. Yeah. And I had replaced the batteries in that arrangement I was telling you about with these big super caps. And it worked, actually better than the batteries, because they have a lower internal resistance. I could get more current out of them. Of course, they don't hold as much charge, so the power supply's got to be not just a battery charger anymore. It has to be like a legit supply. But anyways, I started with those. We Frankenstein together a whole amplifier. In fact, it's sitting back here. I have it here now, which is a whole nother story. But that thing was called the D' fibrillator. And I took that to the next year's Rockford Sound Off, and it did a 160 on the same setup. And then we hooked it up to an Audio Precision to measure the power output and bursted it, and it did just over 15,000 watts.
Wow.
And that's why it became the T15. It was just, that's what that Frankenstein thing did that day, and okay, now we need to make a real amp that does this. So that's kind of how that came to be. So yeah, later we got those Korean Nest caps and started working with those. Those are what went into production with it. It's like a cylindrical cap, maybe this tall and silver dollar size around, and the a typical aluminum electrolytic cap, the standard cap you'd see in any amplifier, the big caps that are in any amplifier of that size might be like, I don't know, 4,000, 5,000 microfarads. So 5,000 millionths of a farad, right? These Nest cap, ultra cap things were 400 farads each. So it was like mind blowing getting these things, like, wow, these things can really hold some power. And so to get up to the voltage that we needed for the T15 and that, I think it required a bunch of them still, because the voltage is low. So you have to like series a bunch of them together.
Yeah.
I want to say it had, trying to remember now, somewhere around 80 of them, but it worked out to like 200,000 joules. And a joule's a watt for a second. So that amplifier can put out 200,000 watts for 1 second if you could put the appropriate load on it. So yeah, that's how kind of that thing came to be. Years later, after I didn't work there anymore, somebody that also doesn't work there anymore, but worked there for a very long time, Mark Lieber, called me one day and said, "Hey, I'm not with Rockford anymore, and I want you to come over to my house, though. I've got something for you that belongs to you." And that was deep
awesome.
Yeah,
nice.
So it's here now.
So what year was that you showed up to CES with that thing? I remember on that cart with the rack below it and the.
Yeah, that was a good time. That I believe that was 2005.
05-ish.
Yeah, we rigged up the wall, right? With, I think, half of the amp was running all the full range speakers on top. It was like 6x9s in boxes.
Yeah.
Like maybe, I don't know, 8 or 12 of those or something. And then we had 60 10s. I think they were 10s or maybe 12s. With 60 of those, and those were running on just the other half of the amp, just the other 2 spare channels that it had. The T15's a 4-channel. And so you probably got the demo.
Oh yeah.
Back then. So we did that Thursday, Friday. I think every half hour maybe we were doing those demos, and I would give the speech about what's going on and how it works, and then I'd play some like classical music so you could see, it's a Class A/B. It sounds good. It's very hi-fi sounding, and then it was like I would drop the bass with like
people.
Yin Yang Twins or something, right? Or something. And so we did that Thursday, Friday, Saturday, every half hour, I think. And then towards the end of the day, Saturday, I'm giving the demo, and I'm at the last part of the demo where I'm letting it pound. And there's this little guy in a suit with a tie and a CES badge in the audience, and he's looking at me doing this. And I didn't know what the badge was from the distance I was at, and I'm like, what's this guy about? So I finished the demo and I turned it off, and I walked right up to him, like, "Hey, what's going on?" And he's like, "Every day now, for the last 3 days, every half hour, this entire building is rattling. Now I know where it's coming from. You're done. Turn it off." I'm like, "Are you serious? Like, we're only..." He's like, "I was in the bathrooms in Central Hall." We're in North Hall. The mirrors are rattling in the bathroom. Like, turn it off. So I believe on Sunday we were done. We didn't give demos. We could just talk about it. But that was I'll remember that one.
I would have used that as a testimonial on future product.
Well, I think, didn't that end up turning into like a retail program for dealers where there was like a package where they could buy a bunch of the prefabs and all of that stuff? I think there was some sort of special or something.
Yeah, I think Tony Candela was responsible for a lot of that, and he was doing it with the 300 the 302, the T302, because that thing was super underrated. It was really like 1,000 watts. You put enough woofers on it, even if they're sharing 1,000 watts, it's pretty stinking loud. So he had something wrapped around that. In fact, he and I traveled around the country together doing a program that he put together called the T302 Challenge, where we were going to dealers all over the country with the Power Cube tool in tow, and we would do a live, I use the word dyno now. We would do a dyno on the 302, and then you could bring any amplifier that you wanted, as long as it was the same price or less than a 302, and we would, dyno it. And if you could beat the 302, then you won like a $2,500 Rockford system.
Wow.
And it was undefeated after all the places we took. There was a couple close ones, but most were not at all.
Broke a lot of hearts.
Yeah. And I was, even at that time, I was a little bit naive to the lies, if you will, or to the exaggerations that exist. I didn't really know, because I didn't have a whole lot of experience with other brands' products. And I remember we were on the plane flying to our first one of these things, and I had I think I had one of those car audio review mags that had all the products. And I'm like, man, are you sure? Like, look at this, this profile. There was a
right.
Like, dude, this profile here says 1,500 watts. It's only 299. He's like, Tony, those are BS numbers. That's not real.
Just move the decimal point one place.
It'll be fine. It'll be fine. Yeah, I remember I was so excited about that magazine. I was supposed to fly in coach, but I was flying with Tony Candela and Rob Wempy. Those guys have a bazillion miles because that's what they do. So they got me into first class with them. I'm sitting next to Rob Wempy in first class, probably my most embarrassing moment at Rockford. I'm still pretty much, like a low on the totem pole at this stage there. And Wempy's a VP. And he got me in first class, and wow, I'm sitting next to him on the plane. We're looking at this, and I'm like, holy cow, this like profile amp, whatever. And I his hot coffee right into his lap in first class, all over him. And I'm like, oh, Rob, I'm so sorry, dude. Like, I still tell him today. I saw him
still
like a
feel
few weeks
bad.
ago. This was like, that was like almost 20 years ago. I met him at Starbucks a few weeks ago, and I was like, remember that time?
How did you go from 15 kW to starting your own business? What was that path in between there?
Yeah, so I was sitting at Rockford one day, and they just walked into my office with a folder, and a couple people looked at me they were around my cube with a look on their face like, oh man. And I didn't really know what was going on. This had been going on throughout maybe the day or a couple days leading up to it, but I didn't know about it. And they called me into an office and were like, yeah, you no longer work here.
Oh.
As of now. Here's a box. Pack up your things, and you got half hour,
What year was this?
Pretty blindsided, 2008.
So it was the recession.
Recession time.
Yeah. So, Rockford was making a lot of changes. They were outsourcing a lot more things and shrinking down the design engineering department. And so, but, sometimes those things are blessings in disguise. And I think that ended up being one of those times. I was born in 1971. So in the 1980s, I was a BMX biking, boombox toting kind of person, and I always had a love for those things. And I just, things at work were getting a little stale, and I just like what the world needs right now is a boombox. And I think what happened is I had gone back to college in those last years there, or I was getting ready to. I moved into a college apartment complex because I had just gotten out of a relationship, and I was like, I'm going to go party with college girls. That's what I'm doing. So I moved into this right by ASU, and I made a bunch of ASU friends, and I built a sick beer pong table in my house, and I had those big Polk reference SR, speakers. And so my house was like, holy cow. When these 18-year-olds would walk in there, they're like, oh my God. So I became popular there. And I like party with these kids at the pool, and in 2008, they're like out there with their like iPhone dock.
Oh gosh.
Like, guys, like you get more than 2 people out here and like you can't hear that thing. You guys need a boombox in your life. Well, you don't know anything about these things, do you? So I ended up building one out of like whatever scraps were laying around in my garage, which was like some plexiglass and just like some junk. I might have ordered some stuff from Parts Express. And I threw together this clear plastic concept.
So this was Diamond Box V1.
Yeah, well, I was still at Rockford. I was still employed at Rockford this time. So I had taken it to our weekly engineering meeting, and they had called in some of the VPs. And I said, check this out. We should do this. And Bluetooth audio wasn't really a thing then. So it just had like an aux in, jack and like a lead acid, like a sealed lead acid 12-volt battery, because lithium was also not a thing. And they're like, okay, maybe. Why don't you go to China and visit some factories and see what you can do? So I went to China, spent a couple of weeks over there, found a place that was going to make the speakers. Me and the speaker engineer from this one place, we designed this dome tweeter that had a horn on some things, and we knew what the amp was going to be, and we had an ID firm do the ID. It looked really sick. Imagine like a 2008 Rockford take on a boombox. Like it looked very aggressive, and it was pretty cool. And I got back to Rockford with all the information, and we had another meeting and stuff, and they went over all the numbers and that and said, okay, so it's going to cost this much to build and this much for that and this. So, we're going to have to sell this thing for like $599. Yeah, nobody's buying a boombox for $599. Sorry, this project's canceled.
Oh.
So they canceled it, and then if it was a very short time after that when the layoff happened. So I feel like I went to China. I didn't really know what was going on at Rockford because I was in China. We designed this boombox, came back. They said $599, nobody will ever buy that. And then I got fired. At least that's how it like felt. And that's how I remember it feeling. So I built one for myself out of, appropriate materials. And after that, but I think that got left at Rockford. So then me and a friend from Rockford, Jason Gerlitz, had built 2 at his house, one for him and one for myself to keep. And I still have that thing here.
Oh, that's cool.
We call it Big Black. It's a gigantic 50-pound black. It's got 10-inch woofers and horns and stuff. So that was kind of maybe Dimebox V1, that thing. And so I was taking that now to the pool now at the college apartment. Like, look, guys, and everybody was like, "Holy cow, you should make those. You should sell those." And at that time, I just got laid off. Like the last thing I'm thinking about is working. I definitely wasn't thinking about being an entrepreneur. I'm just like, I'm going to go back to school, finish that degree that I started years ago, and so that's what I did at that time, and I did that for the next 2.5 years or something. And then I ran out of money again. And I was done with school, and I'm like, I got to go back to work. And some headhunters, once you are at that point with school, you start getting offers and things. And this company in Seattle named Zonar had a headhunter contact me, and I ended up taking that job as a hardware design engineer for this company up there. And that was really cool. And that's where I really learned how to lay out circuit boards. And I learned digital because I didn't do any digital. When I was with Rockford, there was another guy there that did all the digital, and that's all the digital they needed at that time. Zonar built GPS tracking devices for equipment like tractors and things like this. So if you have something like that and you want to keep your eyes on it, or maybe you have a fleet of semi-trucks, and you want to see where they're all at and how fast they're going, and if any of them have a check engine light on, and how fast they're turning corners and how hard they're hitting the brakes. Like all that data was just streaming out of these trucks. That's the thing that they made. It was a pretty cool company. But wow, at that point, I had only really lived in Arizona to Seattle was kind of a shock.
Yeah.
And after a year and a half of that, I was ready to not be in Seattle anymore.
Yeah. It's like the inverse of
It really
Polar
was.
opposite of Arizona.
Wow. I mean, and I had moved there in the late fall, so I just went right from there into winter, and like, geez, the sun doesn't come out till 10. Like, it goes down at 3:30. Like they always depress people with these like lamps on their desks at work that mimic the sun. They sit there and you set the timer on them, and they get brighter and they go down, and it's like, yeah, dude, seasonal depression or whatever they call it there. You got to have this light on your desk, and it was an interesting place. Yeah, I remember in Arizona they sell beer, wine, alcohol everywhere, like literally everywhere. And I had been there for a little bit. I made a couple of friends, and somebody said, "Hey, I'll come over tonight and chill out and have a few drinks or whatever." I said, "Cool, I'll go pick up something to drink." So I went to the grocery store looking for we're going to make I don't know, vodka and Sprite or whatever it was. It wasn't beer or wine, and they didn't have it in the store. And I looked all over the grocery store. I couldn't find it. So I went to another grocery store. They didn't have it either. And I finally asked somebody in the grocery store where it was, and they just looked at me with this crazy face, like I was an alien, which I was there. And they said, "You're not from here, are you?" No, I just moved here from Arizona. Yeah, okay. Well, here, you can't buy that here. In fact, you can't buy that anywhere except for the state-run liquor store. And they close at 9, so you better hurry up.
Oh, gosh.
And you go there, and there's like an armed guard at the door, and they take your license, and I just thought I was buying like a weapon or something,
Get your allocation and register your bottle.
Yeah. That place was interesting. But yeah, I did a year and a half there, and then got a job offer from the time that I was looking, when I told you the story about writing all the letters to all the companies. I mean, that was a long time ago now. Boss Audio. They're like, "Hey, we've got your resume here." I'm like, what?
10 years later.
Yeah, wow. Yeah. Like, yeah, we need, we're looking for an engineer here. And I didn't know anything about Boss Audio, really. I obviously knew the name, but I didn't know where they were or really what they did. And so once I learned what they did and that they were in Southern California, sign me up, get me out of Seattle, let's go. So, packed up, moved to Southern California, loved it there. Worked for a great company. The owner, Sam, he's awesome. And while I was there, the idea for the DD1 kind of came to be. I think Steve had come to me and said, if there was just a tool that I had known Steve from the T15 KW. That's how I had met Steve
I was
Mead.
about to ask that question.
Yeah, because he had a customer that had bought 2 of them. And he did some crazy install and put 2 of those things in this guy's SUV. And so, I got to know Steve like that. And I saw him again a couple times in Vegas for CES and stuff. And we had, talked a few times and stuff. So I knew about this. And he found out I was in California, and he said, if there was a tool that could help people set the gains or something. The how that came to be is a little bit cloudy in my memory, but I remember saying, yeah, for sure.
Mm-hmm.
Let me work on it. And by this time, I had already decided that I was going to start my own business, because I had at this point now a couple of mentors, the owner of Zonar and then the owner of Boss, that were very successful entrepreneurs. And I'm like, this is cool. I like this idea. I want to try to do this. So I had started the Demore Engineering, and with a little VU meter thing, 2 little needles with LEDs, kind of like T15, but it was shrunk down, this little board.
Back to your first project at Rockford. Yeah,
right. Yeah, full circle. My friend that I had made at Rockford, Harry Omai from Japan, had asked me, "Hey, can you make a little, T15 but small, So I had made 10 of those for him, and I put Demore Engineering on them. This is going to be a thing. And so I sent those away. And then my business partner now, Juan Rodriguez, I had called him. He was still in Arizona. And I said, hey, I think I can get you a job at Boss here in California. And he was born in LA, so he didn't mind the idea of moving to California. And I said, you can work here at Boss. I can get you a job here. And then at night, when we're not at Boss, let's build something. And so he was on board. So he moved out. We shared an apartment together in Camarillo, California. And we had talked to Steve about this DD1 idea, and we designed some circuits and did some testing, and that didn't work, this didn't work, several revisions, and we had one that worked, and we put it together in a project box from DigiKey, and it looked like Frankenstein, and it ate up a 9-volt battery in like 2 minutes. It would eat it so fast the battery would be warm. And we just got it done in time, and it was working. And so CES was coming up. So we took it to CES. We found Steve Mead. It was called, we just printed a sticker on a printer for cosmetics for it. And I think it was called the distortion listener or something like this. Is what I just put on there, and Steve hated that name right away. He's like, oh, we got to change that. That's terrible. But I brought it to him at CS, and he took it home, and he was like, this is it. This is awesome. Let's make this be a product. I think I can sell these. If, you guys want to make these, I think I can sell these. And so he's like, first, let's prove it out more. We got to prove it out more. We got to send it to dealers and have them test it on all different kind of amplifiers and stuff. So my partner Juan made 10 of them by hand. In the case that it's in now, and I made circuit boards. I laid out the circuit boards and designed the boards. We got the circuit boards in, and then Juan hand soldered each surface mount part. It was about 100 parts per board.
Oh wow!
So 1,000 parts over a period of a few days without much sleep. We sent these 10 out into the world, and they were out there for a week or two. And Steve came to us like, I need 50. I got orders for 50. Let's give. By the time we had gotten the 50 order going, he needed 200 more. And it was like, wow. Whoa, I think we might have done something here. Mm-hmm. So we applied for a patent. We eventually got it. That was kind of a battle for a while. But yeah, that's how we eventually got to the more engineering anyways. Diamond Box was kind of several years later still.
Yeah, for the longest time, you would always see them sold out on every website that carried them. They were impossible to find, possible to get.
Yeah.
What came next? What was after the DD1?
It was the CC1, the crossover calibrator tool.
Yeah, that's
silly. Somebody else was making something that I had seen at some point that did the same kind of function, but it was really complicated, really expensive, and I thought that we can do this way easier than this, So I designed that one pretty quickly, and we got that one out in record time. And so there was the two tools for a while, and then my friend from Japan came back into the picture again and said, that he loved the tools and what I was doing and stuff, and he's like, Rockford used to make this thing called the IM1 and a S. What was their signal generator called? I
don't remember, but I remember having the signal generator, and it was the greatest tool ever.
Yeah, so it was two separate tools, right? You had an impedance meter, and then so you kind of needed both. You might even needed an amplifier also, I think, to do everything the IMSG does all together. And so he asked if we could do that, and that had a lot of unknowns in it for me. I couldn't just whip up that design. There was generating an analog sine wave, a real one that you can change the frequency of over a wide range, isn't a very easy task. So that required a bunch of research, but yeah,
I use that today.
The IMSG,
used it today.
Yeah,
I use mine weekly.
Oh, that's cool.
I definitely use it weekly.
I was pretty intimidated to try to design that, and once I took the Rockford signal generator and put it on a bench and hooked it up to a scope and saw the output, I was like, oh, okay, well, it's not going to be that hard to beat this, because that was literally like a staircase. It's not a sine wave at all, really. So I'm like, okay, we'll do this right with a sine wave, and so that tool, yeah, that's pretty cool. It's gone under one revision now. We call it the IMSG Plus. And it's the same tool still, but instead of a high and low range, it has like 3 ranges, so that the knob is a little bit easier to tune to the frequency you want. And I added like a feature where it'll hold the minimum impedance or the maximum impedance. So if you're just using it to find like the resonant frequency of a woofer or any
you can
speaker,
just dial
you're looking for
through
the peak.
without like perfectly dialing it in and trying to find that spot.
Yeah, you can just like sweep it slowly and it'll catch it.
Can Revision 3 just do it for you?
That's a possibility. I thought about trying to get rid of the analog part of that and make a digital.
It'd be cool to just hit a button and it just tells you, hey, here's your
I know, right?
tuning.
You know, because the tools like that Dayton DATS, that thing is very handy and very fast, but it also requires a computer. Yeah. So it's really the computer that's doing all the work. The little tool's just kind of an interface. So the idea with ours was that we don't want it to need a computer. We don't want it to need software updates. We don't want it to have to plug into the wall, you know, all these kind of things. But yeah, I would like to figure out how to make it all digital. I know I was actually just looking at that like last week, and the microprocessor that I use on almost all the things that we make that require a microprocessor, I forgot what it was. I think it could only generate a sine wave up to, or not a sine wave, a square wave up to 60 kilohertz. So you can't get a 20 kilohertz sine wave from a 60 kilohertz square wave. You need to go way, way faster. You need like a megahertz. And so it's just not there yet with the technology that we're using. Maybe there's something else, but
no, that's what's awesome with those things, is because it's such a go-to tool that just works. We had Chip Foose on the first episode of this season.
Oh, cool.
We were talking about digital rendering in the future and how all that stuff was. And his comment, you remember this, Matt? His comment was, you know, I come back to those programs and I don't really remember every tool and that kind of stuff. But you know what? Every time I pick up a pencil, it still works. And that's how I kind of think of that IMSG, is that like there's lots of ways to get signal into a system. There's lots of meters and things you can drag to a car, an O-scope, all these things that you can do, but having these tools that are super simple and you know right where it is in your toolbox, and you know you're going to grab it and it's going to plug in and it's going to work, and it's so quick, and no setup, and no, hey, my app needs an update, or my computer needs to do this, or where's the cable that plugged into this. It just freaking works, which is cool.
Yeah, that update stuff drives me nuts. That's one of my pet peeves.
Yeah, I think those tools, honestly, the ones that you have are so key for installers, right? Because when I think about the random tools that I use all the time, I don't know if I use any tools more than those tools that you just mentioned.
That's cool.
Like I said, just today, I use IMSG all the time. That's probably my number one most used tool.
What do you usually do with it? Like, what's the most common thing you do with it?
Well, obviously, most common is just seeing if the signal chain is all there, right? Seeing if a speaker is connected, finding resonant frequencies, airspace, stuff like that.
Yeah, I'm constantly using it to verify tuning on enclosures.
Like that's probably the most unknown thing about that tool that most people don't understand that tool can do. It's much more than just a signal generator.
Yeah, way more. When you put that combination together of a signal generator, an impedance meter, and an amplifier, there's a lot of different things you can do with it. Yeah, it's interesting to like put it on a ported box that's not in a vehicle and see the tuning, the one you just built that's sitting on your bench, and then you put it in a car and see the tuning is different, and then you roll down the passenger window and tuning's different again, and that's kind of fun to see that too.
I literally used it last week. I do some work for an audio manufacturer that builds subwoofer enclosures, and I was pulling a woofer out of one of their enclosures to build another test box for. And I looked at it, and I looked at the way they had the polyfill in the box, and I'm like, this is not an efficient use
Right.
of polyfill. And so I put it back in the way it was, and I ran a sweep, and then I took the woofer out, moved the polyfill, and changed it again, and was able to it was effectively seeing about 15% more volume, not changing what was in the box, changing where it was in the box.
Wow.
And it was like, and then being able to show them, like, look, when you're putting these together, put it together like this.
Well, that's what I think most installers don't recognize about that tool is we're in the day and age where we're building complicated enclosures, right? Not everything's a square box anymore. So to calculate airspace and the tuning of the box, you need a tool like that. And you can do it super quick and super easy. And then there's different things that you can do. Like, I think my favorite thing I like to do is to take like black hole tile, and, you know, if the box is too big, I can start putting tile in the enclosure to get it to the perfect spot.
Yeah, it's that impedance curve. It's just so sensitive to all the things. For Diamond Box, we in our biggest speaker called the XL3, it has 6 woofers in the same airspace. So that works fine as long as all the woofers are the same. So we have to match the resonant frequency of the woofers. So when we get our shipment of woofers in, we bin them. We measure them all by hand. We get 1,000. We measure 1,000 woofers by hand. Someone sits there for days and does this, and then bins them. And when they're doing this, if somebody tests something in another part of the shop, like they test a speaker, it throws it off. Just even across the room, those air vibrations. It's just so sensitive. One time I had a new guy doing the testing, and he was setting the speaker on something else to hold it that was like kind of rattling or something. It wasn't like secure all the way. And I just moved it and it like changed it, So yeah, you can get a lot of information out of that impedance curve.
Yeah, I remember a video when you first came out with the IMSG and you were kind of showing the enclosure volume, and you're doing testing with polyfill, and you're doing like A/B comparisons and proving that a certain addition of polyfill, you're gaining airspace because you're slowing down the air inside. So like, I'd say a majority of our industry is very uneducated, right? They're just part swappers or putting stuff in. They don't even know why the fuck polyfill's in a box. They just think it's supposed to be there. They don't know its purpose, but the tool that you developed can prove exactly its purpose, right? A/B compare, just like that.
Yeah, I like that tool a lot too.
So there's DD1, the crossover calculator tool, IMSG, and then the other one is there one more?
There's the Amp Dyno, right?
There is, it's called the AMM1. It stands for like the audio multimeter because it has a couple of things besides just a couple of useful tools that you might want, as in like a voltmeter. But it's got an AC voltmeter, a DC voltmeter, and then an AC current meter. And it also recognizes the phase differences between the AC voltage and the AC current. So basically, if you run an AC voltage to something that is what we call purely resistive, which is typically things that I don't know how to explain that any other way, actually. If it's just a resistor, not a speaker, let's just say for purposes of audio, you run AC voltage into a resistor, then the current, then Ohm's law applies, the Ohm's law that people know, the DC Ohm's law, which is, volts divided by ohms equals amps. And it applies in real time as the sine wave is happening. So like if you could draw out the voltage or you saw it on a scope and you had another scope that was doing the current, they would be exactly the same on top of each other. So the voltage and current are in phase, and that's called a purely resistive load, or you would say it has a power factor of 100%. So have you ever like looked at the back of like a home audio receiver or something, and sometimes you'll see something confusing like 300 watts, 350 VA.
Yeah.
You might see that sometime on the back of something that plugs into a wall. And before I understood it, I always used to like not understand it. Volts times amps is watts. Why is watts 300, VA's 350, and I'd understand. But in AC, Ohm's law, there's a lot more components to it. So if you start putting voltage into something that's a capacitor, for example, or capacitive in nature, the current will happen before the voltage, because you're kind of like pushing voltage into this. You know, if it's a discharged capacitor, let's say it's like a black hole, so you're like pushing voltage in there, but the voltage isn't building up because it's empty, but the current's flowing in. So you can see how there would be like a delay in the voltage. At least that's how I remember it in my head, that if you're doing something capacitive, the voltage lags the current, or you say the current leads the voltage. And something that's inductive, like a coil of wire, like a voice coil, and it's the other way around. Then it's voltage first, then current. So because of this, since we're audio guys, you're running your amp, which has an AC voltage output, into a subwoofer that has a capacitive and inductive property to it, because you have a coil of wire that gives you that inductance. You have this mass that you're trying to move, so that kind of gives you a capacitive, depending on the frequency. If you ever, on the DATs, if you run something, I think they have a phase curve and you see it all crazy. And that's what it's saying. Like here it was capacitive, but here it got inductive. And so the AMM1 tool like recognizes this, measures it, and can calculate what that phase difference is. And so then it can actually calculate like true watts. And the reason I did that is because before the AMM1 came out, and one of the reasons I made the AMM1 is because people were, doing this thing that they like to call clamping, where they hook up a voltmeter and a current meter to the speaker output, and then they, blast it, clip the heck out of something. And, I got 100 volts and 100 amps. So that's, 100 times 100, that's 10,000 watts. And, as an electrical engineer, that's not right. And so I just was kind of like, let's see if we can't maybe make a tool that does exactly that, but like make it accurate. I don't want to make like a toy. I could make a toy that would just do that, put both the clamp and the voltmeter in one tool and just do what they're doing. But I want to make a tool to actually do it right and show it. So that's what it does. So if, the voltage is 100 and the current's 100, but they are 90 degrees out of phase with each other, and then it's not 10,000 watts anymore. Now it's like 7,000 watts. So it has that feature, plus it looks for hard clipping and won't count any power that's like, when it's clipping hard, because it's not how we rate amplifiers. So that's what it does. It does have some other features that I don't think anybody's using, because the dyno part of it, if you want to call that part the dyno part of it, that's kind of like the popular thing that people know about it. But that one has some really useful things, like the DC voltmeter. I put a min-max hold on the voltmeter like a Fluke would have or something, but I made it really, really, really fast. So what that's useful for is like maybe a customer's car's there and you think maybe their battery is a bit weak. You could just hook the AMM1 to their battery, put it on DC min-max, and just start the car. And that starter kicking in will drop the voltage, really fast, faster than you'll see on a typical meter, but the AMM1 will catch it and it'll report it. And it's amazing. You think you have a battery that's good because the car starts, but you see it actually dropped to 7 volts, and it's like, wow, it still started. But that would be a sign like, hey, this guy needs new, but you could sell that to a customer. Like, look, I checked your battery. This is what I got. I think you need like a better one. So that's one of the things I like about that is the DC min-max. And also you can use the DC min-max to check, like maybe a customer has like a run of aught gauge from his battery back to the trunk and got some big amps back there. You could put one lead of the meter at the battery and the other lead on the amplifier, like the positive battery with one lead and then the positive amplifier input with the other lead across the car, and then put it on DC min-max and then like bump the amp. And then it'll record the drop that it saw on that wire during like that bass note. So you could be like, oh, you're losing, 0.3 of a volt when it bumps just on this wire. Like this wire is losing 0.3 of a volt. So then you could sell big 3 upgrades or better wire, things like this. So it has some other things, but I don't think they've been talked about enough probably.
So what about the Amp Dyno? What's the history of the Amp Dyno?
So the big Amp Dyno, right?
the
The
big
Yeah,
Bench
yeah, the
one,
big boy.
the Honey Badger, as we like to call it. Yeah, the Honey Badger kind of came to be because of the same, people clamping their amps and things. And at Rockford, we had this thing called the Power Cube that I mentioned earlier. And it was a really cool machine. I had one in my office, and it did kind of what an Amp Dyno does, but it did it at, instead of just purely resistive, it also did it at these capacitive and inductive loads to kind of try to simulate more like with a woofer. And once I got really familiar with my Power Cube at Rockford and how it worked and what I was looking at, I realized that that's a really good tool when you are developing an amplifier. If you're an engineer that's like designing an amplifier, it's really good to be able to run it in those capacitive and inductive loaded conditions to look for stability problems in the amplifier, protection problems, and these things. But once the amplifier is designed and it's on the market, it's not really useful for a consumer. So I'm like, we just need something to just tell us the watts, like how much power is this? And so yeah, that dyno is actually one of our early products. So as we were talking about product development, I think the Amp Dyno actually fit in maybe right after the CC1. It was pretty early on, and I was pretty novice with digital still at that point. The CC1 is digital. That was my first. The DD1's all analog. The CC1 was digital, so that was my first really dive into the digital world deep, where I had to really know digital. But I remember laying in bed with a breadboard, Juan and I sharing an apartment, not a bedroom, an apartment, a 2-bedroom apartment. I'm in bed and I have my breadboard there, and I'm like tinkering around with this microprocessor and this LCD display, and I figured out how to make the micro, how to read the A to D ports and display stuff on the screen, and start doing math and this and that. And I'm like, wow, if I just had like a load bank, I could kind of display power here maybe. And really, we again just kind of Frankenstein this thing together in like a day. And then the next day had Juan and I running all over our apartment, finding every amplifier, every home audio receiver that we had in our possession and running them on this thing and testing them, So we had like a couple old RX Yamaha receivers and an old Fisher and some old Pioneer and an old Denon and just all these things we had laying around. We were running them all, having a battle of the receivers, which was a lot of fun. Kind of found that this old Fisher I have from 1980 was the reigning champ, amazingly. It was the underdog, but it won. So yeah, that's kind of how that came to be. Again, that was with Steve Mead. I ran it by him, what I had going on and what I had kind of figured out and my idea for it. And then he threw his ideas at it, and we got one in a case. We took it to SEMA. We had a SEMA booth space, and we were rookies at SEMA, so they put us like in Chinatown next to like the guy that sells lug nuts. Literally, I think our neighbor was selling lug nuts. And we had a little booth there, and we were showing it off and stuff. And we put it in a real case, and I thought we might sell like 10 of them or something. That'd be pretty cool. And I think we've sold like 80 of them or something. And
Wow.
And they're mostly out of stock all the time. We kind of just wait until we get a few orders and then build a batch of 10, because honestly, they're a pain in the butt for us to build. They don't really fit into a normal production process. They have a lot of special parts in them and stuff. So they're not the easiest thing for us to produce. They're very disruptive, but it is a really cool tool, and it works pretty awesome. And it really is the truth teller. And that's why we call it the Honey Badger, because it doesn't have any feelings. It doesn't care. It's just going to kick your ass and move on,
And spawned a few YouTube careers over running amp dynos.
I was working with somebody the other day, one of our customers that has one, and he tests amplifiers, and he's got a bunch of amps that he's testing for some companies, and they just keep blowing up. And he's like, I don't know what I'm doing wrong. I've been in audio for, forever. And I know what I'm doing, but I just can't. Everything blows up on my bench on this thing. I think something's wrong with it. So I spent a good week with him, like going over different scenarios and having him test different things and stuff. And I just couldn't find any problem with any of his setup, his power supplies, all his bench. And we went over all of it from the amp dyno to where it plugs into the AC outlet, and couldn't find anything. So finally I just said, I'm just going to send you one of my amps that I know works. Like I'll test it on my dyno and, one of our E-series amps. I'll just send it. And he's like, I might blow it up. I said, I don't care. Blow it up. It's fine. And sent it to him, and it didn't blow up. And I was like, geez, really? Like all these amps are blowing up, every single amp. So it really does. If your things aren't solid, it'll find that. It's really hard to run a constant sine wave into a resistor. That's like the hardest thing an amplifier could do. It's not something that it would see in a car, but it's a possible scenario that could happen, and it's the hardest one. So that's why you test it that way. And if it can handle that, it's going to handle everything. At Rockford, we used to really, that's one thing Rockford had when I was there. We beat the crap out of the amps. They didn't go into production until they could do that day in and day out.
The power cube you were talking about, is that what generated the waterfall graphs?
Yeah,
Yes.
I knew that's what brought that.
Yeah, I was trying to put that together. I'm like,
at the moment, I was like, I could see where that future product came into play. Yeah.
I have a cool 15 kW story about that tool. That tool's made by some guys in where are they? Their name's Audiograph. I want to say they're in Sweden. They're somewhere in Northern Europe, Norway, Sweden, somewhere in that region, maybe. My geography's not that great in that part of the world. And anyways, the owner was super cool, and I had tested the T15kW on that. And since the T15kW didn't rely on the power supply to be able to like double the power, and how no amp actually can double as the impedance goes because of all the losses, but the T15 like almost does. Like it's almost exactly double. It's so the power cube is like a cube. It looks like a Rubik's cube. I mean, it's just like. And if you go to their website and see the examples, like nothing looks like that. They have all these different waterfall shapes. It's like this one has a bad protection circuit. This has a bad power supply, whatever. And so I sent this to the CEO there, my graph, and I'm like, I made this amp, and this is what it did on your machine. And I didn't know if I'd hear back from him. I didn't know him. And he wrote right back whenever it was, daytime for him. And he was like, holy cow, like, what was that? What did that? I've been doing this for 20 years. Thousands of amplifiers, like what? So I explained it to them, and so they made a whole thing on their webpage about it. Like the Rockford T15, the only amp in the world that's ever done anything like this. It had this like perfect cube.
That's awesome.
That was fun. Yeah.
So, at what point do you start getting into amplifier development with your company? We had the Diamond Box V1, and then you had the Steve Mead tools, and then Progression, the amplifier. Yeah,
my. Japan friend again. As I'm going through this, I'm like, wow, oh my son, thank you. So many things came from him. So he came to me and said that he was going to license a well-known brand that we all know, but I'm not going to say because it didn't work out. He paid a bunch of money to license this brand, and he was going to sell car audio products under it. And he wanted to develop a very high-end car audio amplifier. Now, in Japan, like the super high-end car audio is what they do over there. I mean, they love it. They just love the idea of magic, and they can hear grass grow, and they're just really cool people. But I said, okay, like I'll try to do something. And so it took a couple of years of development, and I developed our A-series amplifier. Big, expensive $9,000 thing. It's like 30 pounds, tons of billet aluminum on it, and it's just they're super badass. So I worked on that for years, back and forth with Japan with it. We got one that was ready to present to him, and he liked it, and then he said, "But you're not finished yet because we need to tune it." So we go to tune this. I fly to Japan to understand what he's talking about because I don't. All the values of all the resistors and capacitors and things on this amplifier have been calculated, with software and calculators and simulations and audio precisions and things, uh, objective things, not subjective things. And so I go fly to Japan, and he brings me to this shop, and everything in Japan is kind of shoes off and come into this little room, and everything is respected there, and it's kind of like ties into the religion and everything, right? So it's just a very very different environment. And I walk in this room and I meet this guy, and he is like the old head product development guy for like Luxman.
Oh, yeah.
Luxman was Alpine's high-end home audio brand. So very, high-end stuff. And so I go in there with him, and he's saying things to me about the amp, and he looked at the schematic and this and that. And so what he wants to do is he wants to hook up, I don't know the real name for these things. I don't really use one, but a lot of electrical engineers will have these little boxes that have knobs, and it's like a variable resistor. You can just like attach the leads, and it acts as a resistor of all kinds of different things. And there's, for capacitors and resistors, there's these boxes. I guess it's handy to do exactly what we were doing. If you want to see how a circuit works with like a bunch of different resistor values, you can hook this up. So anyways, he's got this thing like plugged into the amplifier, where he had just like soldered the leads into my circuitry somewhere, and he was going to just start willy-nillying these knobs, and I'm like, dude, like, let's, I don't think this is a good idea. And so he would listen to music, and then he would turn the knob, and he was listening to music, and he would like turn the knob, and then he'd like move it to a different part of the circuit. And we were doing this all day long. And honestly, I was like feeling like it was a waste of time. This is kind of nuts. And, he's telling me that he's explaining why he's doing it, and it makes sense, his explanations. And of course, I'm very much respecting the guy because of his history. And we ended up turning the wrong knob the wrong way, and we smoked one of his like $3,000 tweeters or something. Just poof, and I'm like, oh man. So I'm apologizing for that, and he's like, no, it was us, and it's fine. And they get another one. They put their speakers back together, and he's tweaking and tweaking and tweaking. And he did some setting, and he was like, that's it. And I'm listening to it, and maybe I did hear it. I was kind of like, okay, I think that is it.
Wow.
I don't know if I just drank enough of his Kool-Aid. I really heard it, but it was kind of a magic moment. And I would say that I did have an experience at Rockford that was similar to educate me that there can be differences that maybe can't be measured but can be heard. Because when I was working for Mark Albers on that Hafler stuff, we had these studio monitor speakers, powered studio monitors. They're used in studios all over the world. And one of the MOSFETs that was in there was end of life. And so he had to change it to a more, available MOSFET. And he built a sample with the old and with the new and wanted me to listen to it. And I mean, it's on paper and on so I tested it on the audio precision. Everything's the same. Same frequency response, same signal to noise, same intermodulation distortion, same, like everything I could test is the same. But when I listened, they sounded different. And as a young engineer, I didn't understand. I went to Mark Albers and I'm like, look, I tested everything and they're exactly the same, but I swear they sound different. And so he listened, and then we got somebody else to listen from like a different department, and everybody agreed that the sound difference was there. And I'm like, Mark, what gives? Like, And he's like, you can't measure everything. You just can't. We measure with sine waves. Like, are you listening to sine wave? You're listening to music. Like, music is a very complicated signal. And so that kind of opened the door for me to, okay, maybe there is like a bit of magic that can exist. Doesn't have to be all calculations and numbers. And then when I went to Japan many years later and had that experience with Ida-san, that happened again. So that was a cool experience. So yeah, he approved it. He blessed it. We put him into production, and I think Japan has bought every one that I've sold. We haven't sold any here in the United States.
And Steve, how much is that amp?
Steve has a few that that he has, but they weren't like retail purchases, So like the ones that have sold have been sold in Japan.
And they retail for, what'd you say, 9,000?
9,000, and it's even worse over there. That's the price I put on them here. That is kind of like, at the time at least, was the rough equivalent to what Japan needed to sell them for. But I think now the dollar yen ratio is a lot less in their favor, so they're probably quite expensive there.
So
now.
if there's any listener listening, enthusiast, who wants one of these amps in their car and wants Gary and I to put it in, yeah.
Or 4 of them. Who knows?
Now's the time. Because I'm
now's the
interested.
And and there is, we sell them to dealers. There's dealer pricing, and it's actually quite good on those, because when I sell them to Japan, it actually has to go through a few channels before it gets to retail. So there's good pricing for dealers on those. But yeah, those are awesome. I keep looking past this computer right now, because I have 2 of them sitting over here that I'm looking at. And one of them is sitting here because my Rockford friend, Tony Candela, that I had mentioned, he's a big Macintosh fan. He's got stacks of the stuff at home. And if it's not Mac, it's not an amplifier to him. And I told him, I got something for your Mac. Bring it over. I've got the audio precision. I've got plenty of power supplies and whatnot. Oh, well, this Mac requires, 2 outlets. It's got 2 AC. I'm like, I got 80 amps worth of AC in here. Let's do this. So he said, all right, I'm doing it. So he took it to be serviced and had new caps and got it all, tuned up. But we haven't had the battle yet. I'm looking forward to it.
It's like taking it to the shop before you go to the drag races.
Yeah, it's like it's
get
exactly
a fresh tune-up. And
which he and I have those conversations too. He's a big car guy, and he's got like this old Oldsmobile with a giant big block with a giant blower on it, and you can't even make a right-hand turn in it when you're driving it, because you can't see past the engine sticking out of the hood. And I have a Mercedes SL that's tuned and stuff, so we're always giving each other crap about when that race is going to go down.
yeah, I'll take the fuel injection.
Yeah. Well, his Olds is fuel injected now.
Oh,
too.
is it? Cool.
Yeah, he's
cool.
got aftermarket stuff. It's a beast. My Mercedes couldn't keep up with it. I know, but I tease him anyways.
Hey, if you have to go around a corner, I'm sure it will.
Yeah. Well, I tell him, let's race to Vegas. The Benz goes 200 plus, so he's done at 130, I think. So it's gonna have to be like a freeway race.
There you go.
Have a chance.
From a dig.
Yeah, right. Yeah, that thing's quite a monster. His car.
So you have smaller amps.
Yeah.
Than you have the sound. We're just gonna air quote the Sound Q amp.
Yes.
And then what led to the small chassis amps that you sell now?
So we made these crazy priced ones because Japan wanted this super high end thing, and then we realized that that's not what people here want. We tried to build something that made sense here, and maybe something around like a Rockford Power Series kind of a price point. So we made these, what we call our T Series, which are those little clear ones. So we demoed them at Knowledge Fest in 2019 in the back of a GTI Rabbit. I don't know if you guys got to see those. They have a clear plexiglass like top. They're about the size of a CD case. They're 300 watt amps. There's a 2-channel and a mono. They're both 300 watts, and they're Class A/B. They're actually Class A for a while, and then they slide into AB, and they're actually a chip off of the old block of those big expensive amplifiers. So we took that same circuitry, shrunk it down with the use of daughter cards and a really innovative heatsink design, and we have these little mini amps. And so that was the next development. We took them to Knowledge Fest. They were super well received. We had people like saying, take my money. And then of course, COVID and other things happened. So we haven't been able to put those into production yet. And it just, that the part shortages and stuff now, it's like, geez, how are we ever going to build these? So we still want to build them. We want to put them into production. They're awesome little amplifiers. They sound amazing. There's nothing like them, which I like to build stuff that there's not much like. Otherwise, there's so much competition. But yeah, we haven't been able to get all the parts together and all the cash together at once to be able to put that over the wall into full production yet. So that project is done, and it's just waiting for those things to happen. And then we thought, well, maybe we should get an entry-level product going that's Class D, because Class D parts are easy to get. Everything's Class D now. So as much as I've been an opponent of Class D over all the years, I just thought, well, if we can just make it a little bit not so Class D with some of the things that bother me about Class D, like EMI radiation, and the way they clip so ugly. When they clip, they just like, you almost don't even need a DD1 when you're setting the gain on a Class D, right? Because you can just hear the amplifier itself, like the components within the amplifier making noise without even being hooked to a speaker. You can hear the transformer windings and stuff like just buzzing inside of those things when they clip, because they do it so disgracefully.
I always tell customers that Class A amps are like an M3 BMW going into a corner, and a Class D amp is like a Corvette going into a corner. The M3 will gently let you know that you're getting close to clipping, and in the Corvette, you're just backwards.
Yeah,
you just spin out.
Yeah,
it just happens.
But yeah, especially the early Class D amplifiers, you'd have like a Corvette C6 Corvette, and all of a sudden you don't have radio frequency anymore.
Yeah,
just completely gone.
And some of the newer cars that have more electronics in them, it'll trigger warning lights and things to malfunction and stuff. I actually have a little pocket AM FM radio that Juan got me so that I could demonstrate the EMI. It's just like a little piece of junk with an antenna on it. And I can tune it to like any AM station that it can try to pick up. Have a Class D amp running on my bench 10 feet away from it, and turn it up to clip, and it just loses all everything.
So why don't we have that talk real quick for the listeners, for the consumers at home and the guys that are working in shops. What else is on that list of what's bad about all Class Ds, and what signifies that you have a really crappy Class D?
Yeah,
there's some decent Class Ds out there.
Yeah, I would say nowadays there's a few good ones. I will say there are some brands that you would think would have a really good one because of their brand reputation and other products that brand makes that are pretty horrible. But there are some decent ones. And a lot of that has to do with that'll be a little bit too technical, but when a Class D clips, the Class D is turning on and off, right? It's switching on and off, on and off, on and off to try to make a sine wave. And so as the sine wave gets higher or taller, you're on more than you're off. And as it goes lower, you're off more than you're on, right? It's like a PWM kind of a situation. But if you're all the way up, if you're at the top of the sine wave, or like it's all the way up, and if you went any higher, you would clip. Imagine if you're trying to control that with something that's turning on and off, you pretty much stop switching. You're just kind of on, right? The off time gets so small that you're just kind of on. Well, the part that's just on is the MOSFET that connects the power supply to the output. So at that point, you're literally just connecting the power supply straight to the speaker. It's just on. And of course, there's feedback mechanisms in the amplifier, and all amplifiers, that compare the input signal to the output. And the input signal saying, hey, I'm like shaped like a sine wave, and I'm going up and I'm coming down. And the output's like, I'm just up. So the feedback mechanism tells the output, like, you need to go down. And, and then it's like, well, now I need to go up. And so there's kind of like an oscillation that happens in these Class Ds. An analog amp does it really gracefully and isn't turning on and off. An analog amp is like when I say analog, I mean A, B, G, H. It's like a water hose spigot. The more you turn it on, the more water comes up. And so you can control the sine wave by turning this water valve gently on and off, and you can make the sine wave go up and down. But the Class D, you're with a light switch trying to control the water coming out of the hose. So when you get to those, when you get near the rail, as we say, or you're approaching clipping, things just get really out of whack. And this oscillation that happens at the top of the sine wave on almost every Class D consists of just all kinds of frequencies of garbage. And it comes out of the speaker wires, like it radiates. The speaker wires like an antenna kind of. It's like radiating out of there, out of the power and ground cables, and just kind of out of the unit in general. And so, it's kind of like having a microwave oven with the door open at that point. And those frequencies get into, some of them dip into the AM radio band. I haven't seen one into the FM band that's pretty high up. I don't think that's a thing, but AM radio definitely would get wiped out, and other things that operate in those bands could even be maybe like tire pressure sensors and things that are in those like hundreds of kilohertz kind of range there.
And is the difference between a good Class D and a junk Class D just in how that switching is regulated, and
Yes.
it just doesn't allow it to get to that point?
Yeah, so like the early Class Ds, like Rockford's early Class Ds didn't even have a controller. When I say controller, like now when you build a Class D, you can get a chip from like TI or places like this. They call them like a Class D controller IC that you can just put your analog signal into, and it will do the converting of that analog signal to PWM within the chip, and has all the provisions and feedback and all that stuff built in, and it just has outputs that run MOSFETs. When you do that, you can have a pretty clean amplifier because they switch a lot faster, and all that feedback and stuff, it's really tightly in there. And that chip was developed by somebody that was smarter than all of us in audio probably, and they just work really well. The downside is that when you do that kind of a design, the designer is kind of limited to what the chip can do, or what its capabilities are as far as like getting a bigger amplifier together. So a lot of the really large Class Ds, even today now, have a topology that's still probably going to be pretty ugly. So the lower power of, maybe sub 1,000 watt stuff and full range stuff, if you use the right controller and it's designed properly, they can be pretty decent. And if you mix that along with like a high quality output filter, and in the case of like our E-series amps, we also put filtering on the B plus coming into the amplifier. And it's not to filter the B plus coming in. So I should say it like that. It's to filter anything the amp generates garbage wise from going out the B plus into the car. So we filter there. We have filtering on the RCAs doing the same thing. We just like added a ton of filtering on it. We call it clean D because it's the result is that it's less distortion. It clips a lot better than if you didn't have these things put on there, and most of them don't. So that is more than just like a slogan or a name. It really, there's some technology there behind that. So yeah, if you do a lot of filtering and stuff, you can make them pretty clean. But my argument against Class D, and it still remains, even though I sell Class D or Clean D, is that, and this came from Tony Candela again, he said, well, it's like the Mona Lisa. You can go to whatever museum the Mona Lisa's in and see it and be like, wow, whatever. If you appreciate art, and you're like, dang, there's the Mona Lisa. And you can like get the best camera available and take a 80 megapixel digital camera and take a picture of it. You now have like a really high res digital picture of the Mona Lisa, but it's not the Mona Lisa, and it never will be. If you zoom in far enough, you're going to see the pixels, whereas the Mona Lisa is infinite resolution, and that's what a Class AB is. There is no resolution. That term doesn't exist. It's infinite. And so a Class D is like the digital photo of a Class AB. They're getting better and better. There's more pixels, more megapixels. And
it's a heck of an analogy.
It's a good analogy.
All the Class D could ever dream of being is as good as an AB. It's not like it's going to somehow be magically better. So for those reasons, I would still prefer an AB, because knowing that, then what's the purpose of having the D? Isn't our sport about having like the best sounding audio? Isn't that why we're ripping the audio out and putting in different audio? It's not to just put something else in. You want to like put the best. So if you're doing that, I feel like it should be AB. But It comes down to cost.
Cost and efficiency. That's where audio has went, especially when the iPod came out with compression and all of that efficiency, cost, all that kind of stuff. So when you develop your Class AB, is it a Class A or Class AB?
It's kind of
so
both.
when you develop that and you try and come over the hurdles of heat and all that kind of stuff, how did you develop your amp?
So when we're talking about the little T series ABs, they generate heat that you need to deal with, like you're saying, and the traditional way of dealing with that is just have a big heat sink that like houses the amplifier board. So we make the housing for the amplifier be the heat sink, if you will. And because it's cheap, it's easy to do, it works. But there's downsides to it. The downside of a traditional amplifier design with the heatsink, the way that we know almost every amplifier to be, is that the heatsink is now exposed. So you can only let it get so hot before you can like burn somebody or start someone's carpet on fire. And the components have gotten so good, like the MOSFETs and things that are generating the heat that are bolted to the heatsink have gotten so good that like a lot of them, like the ones in our T series, they're good up to 175 degrees C.
Oh, that's hot.
That's hot. It's probably approaching 300 degrees Fahrenheit. It's really, really hot. They're fine with that. What's not fine with it is like everything else around it. So, being a fan of the German cars, and then the new generation of Mercedes and BMW also, now they have this new V8 where they kind of like somebody got out the bong and loaded up the good stuff, and then they just decided after a while, like, if we flip this engine inside out, basically turn the cylinder heads 180 degrees around so that the intake is where the exhaust used to be. The exhaust is where the intake used to be. We could keep all the exhaust in the middle of the engine and just put like two intakes on the sides instead of like traditionally you'd have your pipes there. And if we do that, then we could have like a central turbo in the middle and just like feed it all together right there. And we could have like faster turbo response, like all the things that did for the engine. And so all the new V8s that they have are that. And I think Mercedes calls it like the hot inside V8. The heat's like in the middle, right? And I was like, that's cool. Being like a former mechanic and stuff, like, I appreciate that design. That's super cool, and it's totally different, and I love that. I want to make an amp like that. I want it to be hot inside. I don't want the outside hot. So what if I make the heatsink be like in the amp, like a piece of home audio equipment would be, a receiver or something, So that's what the T series was. So I made a heatsink that the fins of the heatsink are also inside. So it's like a square block of billet, and then it's machined out with a water jet on the inside. So there's fins inside of it, and then a fan sits on top of it, and it blows the heat out from the middle and like under the board. And then it's inside the amp with a plastic case. So no matter how hot it gets, it's never hot to touch. So the whole idea of the Class AB being hot, like, well, who cares if you can't touch it? Is the tree falls in the forest, like, did it make a noise? Right? No one's there. So it's kind of like that. It's hot, but you don't know that. And then I can let the parts run hotter. And you don't want to run them too hot because reliability reasons, but instead of letting them go to 80 C, which is typical, I let them go to 120, 130, which is still very safe and very, they'll live a long life at that temperature still, but I can like get a lot more power out of them and stuff. And that helped me shrink it down. So, we ended up with a 300 watt Class AB amp that's the size of a CD case.
Yeah, that's awesome.
It's smaller than our D. That's that same power level. So that's a cool design. I wish that we could sell them right now. I really want to get them out there. We're trying.
So in Arizona in the summer, how hot does the interior get? Let's just say you don't have tint. You've been sitting in the sun all day. What does the interior, do you think, start at?
In the hottest days, when it's in the high teens, we've measured 150, maybe on some surfaces like a steering wheel or dash or something black or metallic, 160 Fahrenheit. The asphalt will get about 150, 160 Fahrenheit. on the street. The trunk's about the same thing. So yeah, I would say 150, 160
So
Fahrenheit.
your A-class
So that's,
amps, how do they do in that environment?
So it does reduce the amount of the difference between the ambient and how hot you can get, and that delta there kind of determines how much cooling activity you can get. So that does stress it more, but they were designed to be able to get rid of the heat that they need to still, even in that hot of a trunk. So and bringing that maximum temperature that the amp can handle up really makes that a lot easier to do. So 130 is 50, 60 is about 150 Fahrenheit. So 60 C would be like 150 Fahrenheit. So if the inside of the car is at 60 C and your amplifier shutoff is at 80 C because you have a traditional one, it only gives you a 20 C window, and you can probably overheat it pretty easily. But in our design, you can go up to 120 C. So it's a lot of room there.
So from your standpoint, are you still, because you're a different scenario, you're in Arizona, are you, when you're installing that stuff, are you supplementing with additional fans? Given
No.
So just how it's designed. Now, when it's installed, is it open? Is it breathable? Is it enclosed-ish? Because you got to think of how some people install amplifiers from a general standpoint, functionality. Some people have covers where the top's still open.
Yeah. The cover of the amp has a hole in the middle where it's the intake, and it intakes the cooler air there and blows it through this inverted heatsink thing, and then out the sides and under the circuit board, and then out the sides of the amplifier into the environment. So you could mount it vertically, horizontally, upside down. All those things wouldn't have any effect on it, and those things do have effect on amplifiers that are naturally what we say natural convection cooling with no fan, because the heat wants to rise. So there are some scenarios, especially if it has fins that are oriented a certain direction and you mount it a certain way, it can be detrimental to cooling. But this one doesn't suffer from that, from those issues. But what could happen is if you, let's say, installed like 4 of them in a spare tire well, eventually the air that's in that well, if it just stays there, would get hotter and hotter and hotter. And yeah, you probably would have some thermal issues. So
Matt, is this because, are you asking these questions because you're doing a car that's going to Arizona?
Possibly.
So is there any other advice you could give, or anything that comes to mind that you think would help the people at home that are designing systems and building systems? Anything that you've seen through your years of, obviously working at Rockford and seeing stuff that got returned or damaged, and you've been around the block a few times. What advice do you have for people setting up their systems?
Well, I'm sure we could get, into a lot of tweaky things and some things that are maybe subjective. But one thing that is not subjective and that installers should be aware of, that I've seen returns on our E-Series amplifiers for, is to ground the amplifier before you do anything else. Because what happens is the RCA shield is typically also grounded. It may be ground through a bit of a resistor, maybe not, depends. And if it is, it's usually pretty small, 10 ohms, 20 ohms, something like this. So basically the RCA shield is also a ground. So what can happen is you hook up the power wire first, and then maybe the speaker wires and whatever. But if you hook the power wire and then the RCAs, you're in trouble. It typically will blow the input circuit of the amp. It might still work, but it might have engine noise after that. And it's never going to go away because there's like some part that you burned up somewhere. Or worse yet, it could blow the ground in the head unit.
Yeah, we see that a lot too.
Yeah. So
I see it, I think is what I've had a few cars in the last couple of years that came from other shops, and like, hey, it's always done this and it's had trouble. And that's been the scenario. And I think that if somebody has trouble and they start to troubleshoot, that at some point they think, oh, I'm going to disconnect this amp, or I'm going to swap this amp, and they remove the ground and leave the power hooked up. And it's like, ugh.
Yeah, I know of the E-Series that we've gotten returned for warranty. I would say 90% of them, that's the problem. The ground on the input got blown.
Yeah.
maybe it got blown when they were taking it apart, but I don't know. But it's blown on them. If we fix that, they work. So I feel like that was the only problem.
You said E-Series. How many amps are in that line? Is it just two or?
There's more. Yeah. We have them at our shop.
You do?
There's a 350 2-channel, a 400 4-channel, a 700 4-channel, a 750 mono, a 1000 mono, a 1500 watt mono, and then a 665 channel.
Wow.
It's a pretty full lineup. And of course the 4 channels can be bridged, so we didn't bother doing a bigger 2-channel because you can just take a 704 and make it to be a 702, just bridge it. But yeah, they're good. They're cool. I have them in my truck. I have 4 of them in my F-250, and they've been in there for a couple of years now, and I haven't had any problems. And in fact, after a year of having them in there, I took them apart, took them out of there, took them apart, modified them with the new current averaging invention once that patent got granted, and I had to take those amplifiers out of the heat sinks that they were in and put them in the next larger heat sink up. So I had some space for some lithium cells and the power supplies and the control circuits and other things that are required to make that invention work. And I've been running those in there for a year without failure. And that's a pretty cool product. But we right now on that are kind of trying to figure out what to do with it.
Yeah. So how much can we talk about this? Or?
Sure. Yeah, totally.
Okay. So can you were awarded a patent?
Yeah.
And I'll tell you what I know from the outside, very small power consumption, very small power wire. You're basically charging some sort of battery or capacitor system at a slow, or basically charging that up, and then the amplifier has power that way, and mostly for power sports and electric vehicles and cars where current draw is a major concern. Is that, did I have a decent understanding, I hope?
Yeah, that's definitely it. And it could be scaled up, for like the SPL world, but that's not where I plan on taking it. But it could be it could be dialed, scaled to any size. But it makes most sense, I think, in things that don't have a lot of power to give. And again, my friend in Japan, geez, you go through these things and I'm like, all this stuff leads back to Harry Omai. He's a wise old man. He's my Mr. Miyagi.
There you go.
Love that guy. He came to me and said, hey, Tony-san, we got these new Toyotas, and if you try to get more than like 6 amps out of them, they go berserk. Kind of warning lights and things. And we need an amp that, draws only 6 amps, but still has like some decent power. And it's like, well, can't really break the laws of physics. I mean, you got 6 amps at 12 volts, you got 70 watts. That's what you get. But it got me thinking. Really, that's what the T15 does, sort of. It uses ultra caps to store the big bursts of energy that are needed during transients. But this needs to do that same thing, but like all the time, not just on the burst. It needs to have like a lot more storage. And, when the T15 was developed, these lithium cells didn't exist, or not the way they do now. Some of these lithium ion cells, and with lithium ion, by the way, that's like a broad term that encompasses like 10 different chemistries. So I have people all the time emailing us like, why are you using lithium ion in dime box? You should use like lithium, cadmium, potassium, whatever, and I'm like, that's lithium ion. I'm like, there's a bunch of them. But some of those are amazing, like especially the ones that these guys are using in like these vape pens that they're modifying. They can do a ton of current. One of the cells I'm using can do 30 amps continuously. And that's just living through the 80s and D cells and boom boxes and stuff that, you have a boom box that you have to buy $30 worth of D cells so you can use it for 2 hours, and then they're garbage, to these cells that can put out 20, 30 amps continuously for hours, and you can recharge them 1,000 times and stuff. Like they're magical. So I lost my train of thought a bit there. So yeah, we're using those cells. It's like a T15, but if you had lithium cells instead. So There's a lot more storage there. Enough so that you can take advantage of the music being music and play it continuously. It'll never drain. You can do an amplifier like the 404 that's in my truck, 400 watts out, and it's like 5 or 6 amps in when it should be like 40 amps in. And you're taking advantage of a couple of things. There's a couple secret sauce pieces. There's the music is dynamic, and then there's the impedance rise of speakers. It's really my friend in this invention. So like the subwoofer amplifier, yeah, it's 1500 watts, but is it, when you hook it to your sub, is it really? Like, we have people saying, hey, I think my AMM handheld dyno isn't working right because I can only get like 400 watts out of it. It's a 1500 watt amplifier. And I'm like, okay, so when you're getting the 400 watts, like what's it hooked up to? Well, it's hooked up to this dual 2 ohm woofer in parallel, so it should be 1 ohm. And I'm like, okay, so put it on this screen that shows ohms and watts and do it and tell me what it says. Oh, it says 400 watts at 6.4 ohms. And I think it's broken, and it's like you have to get into the explanation of impedance rise, which is a function of that capacitive and inductive load that we were talking about earlier. So anyways, you take advantage of that and you can really get a lot of power out on a continuous lower current. It's just those big peak currents, like a 1500 watt amp, you need 150 amps, but you only need it if you hit that one right impedance at full power. Other than that, you don't need it. So as long as there's something in there to do that. So that's kind of what the premise is of that technology. We got a patent. My patent attorney said, hey, this seems like a pretty big idea. I think you should leave, you were granted a patent, but we should do a continuation in part, which is like, let's leave it open in case we have some other ideas. So we did that. We had other ideas about controlling the power supply from your phone and things like this. Like, I only want my amp to draw 6 amps, so we wrote all that and got a second patent on it. So it's actually got 2 patents with a bunch of stuff like that in there. But back to what we're going to do with it, at the last show, Brian's show, I kind of was telling people, ideally, I would sell this patent to some big company that has the capital to put behind it and make a bunch of products. And then I can just go like invent the next thing, because that's what I want to do. I just want to make new things. That's what makes me happiest, and that's what I enjoy doing. But, that's kind of a dream world, I think, and it definitely didn't happen. And the people that saw it and got the demo either thought I was like pulling their leg somehow, or they didn't understand it, or maybe they thought they could just go ahead and design their own and not buy the patent. But, so we're trying to figure out what to do with it. And if any of those people are listening right now, I would just say, it's not about, people sometimes don't understand the idea of a patent. They think that it means like, hey, look at me, I invented this new novel idea. It does say that, but the more important thing about a patent is it tells this idea that's on this paper, only I get to sell this for the next 20 years, not you.
Right.
And so I think that's the takeaway that they should have got from it, and they didn't. If they want to get into the market of putting 1,000-watt amplifiers on jet skis, they need this.
Yeah.
Well, not just that. Let's talk about where cars are headed, because I work on Teslas probably more than anyone on the planet, and the new systems are 15.5 volts. They developed this electrical system to perfectly handle the capabilities of the internals of the car, right? So you have like 20 amps of current that you can deal with on the car. So this is like a perfect scenario for what you're saying. And I feel like more and more manufacturers are going to develop, because everyone's running towards lithium. Lithium's expensive. They're not going to put more than they need in the car. They're only going to put what they need to support the electrical system inside the car, which means from an aftermarket standpoint, we're all in trouble unless we come up with alternative methods of making this equipment work, which I have in like the new 15.5 Teslas. But most people, if they hook up a amp that draws 30 amps of current, they're going to blow the lithium ion battery under the hood, right? So this is where everyone's headed, right? We're going to start approaching different voltages that are over most power supplies at 16 volts, right? We're going to probably have each manufacturers have their own voltage, 18 volts, 24 volts, 48 volts. So as an aftermarket company, engineers like you need to start figuring out how we're going to create power where we can't pull that power, or different power supplies, or kind of like what you said, have an internal battery inside the amplifier that kind of recharges and you're not pulling much current at all. Because again, like I said, the new Teslas, I mean, you're basically subject to what like a maximum amperage draw would be out of a power port, right? So 10 amps, 20 amps most. That's it.
That works even better in that
Right.
scenario too. Is that voltage keeps going up,
Right,
and
exactly,
that current draw
exactly,
keeps going down
exactly.
and down. All of a sudden, it's going to be, hey, we have a 1 amp draw
Right.
at 48 volts, and we're making 5,000 watts in this car.
And that's
It's
what a
gonna
lot
be
of people
amazing.
don't realize is like when you know how to use the equipment at that voltage. Granted, the equipment still has to be under that. It has to perform up to 16 volts. There's other ways that I've designed the system to where I use a DC to DC converter, but I step it down off of like a 14 volt lithium ion that can charge up to 16 volts. So you can step it down if you have an amplifier that isn't stable at 15.5 volts, essentially. But these are things that we're dealing with to install equipment in these cars, right? There's a lot of work that has to be done to do this and procedures in place to install something massive in a car like that. But the normal installer, like, they're just not touching the car. Those cars are not going to be touched. It's not going to be an option for most shops to do aftermarket equipment. They're just saying, hey, we don't want to touch that car. And this is going to be the norm. Most cars are going to be electric. Most cars are going to have their own voltage. Most cars are not going to have extra current available to be used on an audio system.
Yeah, that's one of the really cool things about that invention is that unlike the idea of just adding, I've had people say, wasn't that just like, what if I just added a bunch of lithium batteries? Like, isn't that the same? It's not at all. And the difference is that in the invention idea, the amplifier is not connected to the vehicle's electrical system at all. It's connected to the lithium cells. The lithium cells are connected to a power supply that's connected to the electrical system. So that power supply basically isolates the car from the amp. So you can make that power supply in any flavor you want. If the car's 1,000 volts, you can make it be a buck converter that goes from 1,000 to 14. So it's very, very easy to make that system work with any kind of input voltage you want and still use 12 volt amps if that's what we choose to use. If all of a sudden, 42 volt amps become a thing, then I just change the configuration of the lithium cells to work with that, and then boom, that you're there. So it's really adaptable to those things you're talking about.
I have a really small market for you to go after with that too, which is antique cars with 6 volt. All the pre 60s cars that guys want audio in that are restored, but they want audio, and pre 67 Volkswagens. And I don't know that you're getting into the some of the 50s cars that still had positive ground. That's the other.
Yeah, it would totally work with a 6 volt car, no problem. Positive ground, I don't know. I haven't ever thought that through. But yeah, a 6 volt car wouldn't be a problem at all.
Yeah, I'm sure you could sell at least a dozen amplifiers in the next decade.
Yeah, so we don't know where we're taking it. We have these prototype amps that have it all built in. But I think the problem with that is that I have to sell amplifiers against companies that sell amplifiers that have been forever, and dealers that are locked into selling said amplifiers. There's some dealers with some brands, and you try to go in there with another brand, and they say, I can't carry your brand because I carry this brand, and if I carry you, they're going to cut me off. It's a bit of a mafia, if you will. So for those reasons, we are currently working on putting this in its own little box. So if you saw the side-by-side that we built for the Brian's Mastermind show or Master Tech show. That's what we did in there. We used our off-the-shelf Class D amps, and then we built a box that housed these power supplies and these cells. And that was what was connected to the vehicle's electrical system, was the box. And then the box had 4 sets of outputs that powered the amplifiers. If we do that, then I think we can play nice with everybody and all the other brands, and the JL guys can keep their JL amps, and the Rockford guys can keep their Rockford amps, and they can just put our piece in the middle of it. So I think that might be a more sensible way for us to go to actually sell some product. However, that idea is further away from the ultimate idea of, selling the whole pack, because until I start selling amplifiers, I have it built in, the other companies won't feel threatened enough to want to just buy the patent. So that's like a conflict I have to deal with. But right now we're developing the juice box, if you will, some kind of box. The one on our side-by-side has a like a 12 gauge input. It draws like 20. It's adjustable, but I think I have it set to about 25 amps right now. So it draws 25 amps, and it's powering a couple thousand watts of amplifiers. It's pretty cool. It's cool to watch it work. Yeah.
Anything else new and exciting?
You want to talk about the evolution of Diamond Box? Because you make a lot of cool shit that, like, any enthusiast, especially, like, I feel like that's something Matt Mormon should have in his garage, is a Diamond Box. How does he not have a Diamond Box, right?
It's probably because he's got Dyne audio everywhere.
Yeah.
It's a dime box. So after, Rockford said that you will never sell a boombox for $5.99, that really like fueled my fire to sell a boombox for $5.99. So, and all those college friends I had back in the day saying, you should build these, so all these things were like in the back of my head, like barking at me all the time. And the more engineering, after like 3 years of selling pretty much just hand tools and stuff, was kind of like, I don't know. I think my business partner and I thought we should do something else too. Like let's get another source of income going here. Just for our own stability. And so we said, hey, maybe we should make a boombox. Remember all those kids used to tell us we should make maybe we should make one. And so I just like sketched something out. I didn't know how to use CAD. That's a mechanical engineer's job, not mine. So we had a machine shop next door. So I literally like drew it on a napkin or a piece of paper with a pencil and some dimensions. Like, hey, can you put this on your CNC? Sorry, I don't have a real drawing. I just have this. And he was cool enough to go ahead and program his machine with my hand drawing, and we made us this aluminum panel. And it had to be very basic because we had to like be able to make it in house for a low budget. We didn't have like a big like budget to start this thing. So that's kind of how it became the way it looks. As it turns out, like using that aluminum front panel is really handy because we have Class AB amplifiers. So the front panel is the amplifier's heatsink. And it's like an infinite heatsink. It's like a lot of heatsink for the power that's there. So they never have thermal problems, even in direct sunlight in Phoenix. So that was kind of the design concept. So we built one. We called it the Model L, because it was kind of large. And we thought we would leave space for like a smaller and a bigger one someday. Who knows? So it was the Model L. And we built one, and we built some crap website with like Website Tonight. It was just shit. It looked terrible. And we put like 6 different models. We made a paint booth in our shop, which I also am not a painter. I had to learn how to paint, and it's painted the way like a car would be painted. The boxes were, so they were really pretty. We made a few different colors, and we put them up there, and they were there for a long time, weeks, month, maybe. And then all of a sudden, if you've ever seen the movie Middlemen, they had like these guys were trying to sell stuff, and they rigged up like this bell or something. And like when they finally sold the product, the bell rang. It was kind of like that, like ding, like we sold one. Holy cow. Like what happened? Who bought it? And it was some high-end store in New York bought it for like New York for like their window display. And we were like, wow, this is cool. They bought a white one, and we sent it. And it was like, man, if we could just, sell like one of these a week, like that'd be cool. A little extra income. And then, it was like, ding, 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 and they just started going. It was pretty cool. And we did a little deal with Touch of Modern. They're like this subscription magazine place that reaches this high-end consumer base, and they sold a bunch for us and just did a bunch of deals like that and kind of got rolling. But we had that one model for a while, and we evolved that. We brought out a smaller one. We called it the M. And then one day the shipping box for the L was sitting in my office. It's, of course, much bigger than the L because you got the foam and all the things. It's a huge shipping box. And I just started cutting holes in it with an X-Acto and sticking speakers into this wood box. And I made this giant thing, And then one of my friends come over to visit. He's like, "What is that?" I said, "That's the XL diamond box." I was just joking around, And he's like, "That thing's ridiculous." And he left. I'm like, if Jason said it's ridiculous, we should probably make them and sell them. So we made the XL, and that's the giant one we have now. And then they've kind of evolved over the years with different features and better Bluetooth chipsets and things like that. And every time we would make like a big redesign, then it would get like, instead of the L, it was the L2. And now we're on 3. So everything's on 3rd generation now. We've got 3 different models of what we call the boom boxes, the M, the L, the XL. And then we've also got a subwoofer accessory that goes with those. It's got like 2 8.5s. Everything's Class A, B. They sound really good. We've tried to add some, I don't want to say pro. It's more like DJ, like karaoke.
I've seen the PA box. Yeah. I've seen that in person.
And they're cool. They're loud. They don't, have like the diamond box sound like our actual boom boxes. And those are outsourced designs mostly. And we had mixed luck with those, and we're kind of getting away from those at the moment. So if anybody wants a cool PA speaker and subwoofer, we have subwoofers, which there's not a lot of battery powered subwoofers out there. So that is a cool piece. We are kind of like just getting rid of those now, blowing them out. That company is kind of looking at getting into like real pro stuff, like touring kind of real concerts, Coachella kind of blow your face off speakers. And then maybe mixing that with some of our wireless, maybe our patent and some things like that. So I'm kind of imagining a line array type speaker and like a stage type or understage like subwoofer, 18s, 21s, things like that, real stuff, mixed with the technology of the lithium battery, the Bluetooth, things like this, in case maybe there's no market, and I don't know, I'm going to find out, but it's for the guy that wants to, be able to have a concert on the beach without a power generator, or I don't know, maybe a lot of our Diamond Box customers and like family now are, they love our brand. And they're always like, "We want more. You should build a double XL, or you need to make a bigger this or bigger that." I'm like, "It's just, guys, this thing already weighs 45 pounds. The batteries, 24 cell lithium, like you power your house on it. Like, you want more than this?" And they just want more and more. So, okay, if that's what our customer base wants, and really, I think the way the economy is right now, and the economy is changing, the lower cost items are the harder things to sell. The people that have a lot of money, they still have it. The people that didn't have much, those are the ones hurting more right now. So I think maybe it is time to go higher with that brand and do something crazy. So
here's something that I would buy, and I know a lot of people would buy, because I did all my outside home audio, like around my patio, and I have like the Bose green in-ground things that you see at like amusement parks. If you did that to where it was wireless, uses Bluetooth, has some sort of battery inside that can charge solar, I don't know how you would do it, but you could have multiple of them that would link together. And you can just fucking set them out there, diamond box, it fucking rips, and it's wireless. There's nobody that has anything like that. And I know a lot of high-end people.
The solar charge thing would be cool. I don't know if there's enough power available to do that, or how long it'd play. But
I feel like it depends how long, like how often you use it, right? Like what's the duty cycle of using it? If it's like every Saturday you use it for 2 hours, then yeah, you could probably do that.
But then again, like
think
I
you could
said,
do that.
based on how big you could build it, you could have a battery inside of it. So, I mean, you could have some reserve capacity there.
For sure.
I'm just saying there's a lot
that'd be
of,
pretty cool.
I know, high-end home people, because like there comes a point when just the work consumes the project. And if you could just throw some stuff out there that would link together, that sounds great, that you don't have to worry about running wires throughout your home to your receiver. I mean, I don't know any product like that.
Yeah, that would be super cool. I like that idea too. There are like emerging Bluetooth technologies. They've had it for a while. Actually, we use Qualcomm, actual Qualcomm Bluetooth, which a lot of our like competitors that are just Chinese source stuff, they use knockoff chips that don't have these technologies. But Qualcomm has some like broadcasting technologies now. We use the TWS system, which Qualcomm developed for like earbuds. So they can be left and right, and and so we use that in the Diamond box. You can have a left and a right Diamond box, and then you can wirelessly pair this stereo pair. But they do have like this broadcast thing that they've been working on. I know JBL tried using it for a while in one of theirs, and I guess it kind of works. But I've heard like there's latency issues, and if you have video involved, it doesn't work at all because the latency's really bad. The lip syncing is way off, and there's some connectivity. But I think they've made they're making a newer generation of this broadcast. If that works out, then definitely we're putting that into products and looking at making other products. The thing that you're mentioning would be a perfect candidate for that broadcast situation.
If we're just looking at like Google Home, because I use Google Home at home, and I have different speakers throughout the house, and you can go into each basically chipset and then set a delay to sync everything together. So all of my stuff inside my house is on one receiver. All of my stuff outside is on a different receiver, but I can just set a delay on the outside stuff. So when I open up my patio door, my sliding door behind me, if you're listening to the home music, it's synced up with the outside music. So you could do the same thing with each individual Bluetooth speaker outside and make sure the latency is perfect. And that'd be a dope product because, again, I'd like to have a Diamond box, but at the same point, like out back, I'd want an installed look, right? And every other high-end person would want the same thing because I would put more speakers out there right now, but I'm like, fuck, man, I got to run wires and go through my house and go to the receiver, and that sucks, right? But there's nothing out there.
So you want the Diamond, the Diamond Rocks.
Yeah.
Not the Diamond box, Diamond Rocks.
Oh, trademark.
That's good. I would buy the first couple for sure. You already have some sold. So go into the project knowing you already have some sold.
That really helps. It really does. Because sometimes you just don't know. You just hope, a lot of the things that we've made, it's kind of like, okay, I'm making this because this is something that I want. And I hope that maybe other people want it. Yeah, I don't know. You don't always know that. You're like, well, what if it's only me that likes this? So that's cool. But when I start thinking about that broadcast stuff, it's hard to not think about going back in time and like thinking, wait a minute, we already had this. We actually already had a broadcast system that didn't work over 100 feet or 200 feet. It worked for 50 miles, and there was zero latency, zero. So you got a 50-mile stereo broadcast with zero latency. You can hook as many speakers to it as you want. It's freaking amazing if that could be invented today. We already had this. It was called FM.
Radio, yeah.
And it just died because if you have FM, then the people that are broadcasting the FM they don't have a lot of control over it. And they don't know what everybody's listening to, and they can't feed certain ads to certain areas and all the things that we do now with marketing and targeting and stuff. So it's really sad to see it die because it'd be pretty useful in these speakers. I know that we've had things in the past like FM transmitters and receivers and things that are kind of crap, but I think with today's electronics we could probably make a pretty good one of those things. I know there's also like I visited some factory in China that was making these like 900 megahertz transmitters to do this, the same FM idea, but at a higher frequency and zero latency. They actually had a demo of a musician it's really important for musicians to have a zero latency system or they just can't play. You hand a guitar to somebody with a speaker with even 5 milliseconds delay, they're just screwed. And it worked pretty good, but then like during their demo, it was like cutting out once in a while, and so you could tell they were still kind of developing it. But yeah, I hope one of these companies that works on that kind of stuff can develop a cool technology that'll allow us to broadcast without the issues.
I mean, you could do it through Wi-Fi, right?
You could do it through Wi-Fi.
Yeah, I mean, like Sonos already does that and creates its own mesh network between devices, but that's higher power and.
Well, and you introduce so many things. Like now, your computer needs a software update, and Bill Gates wants to interrupt your music to. Yeah, I don't know. It just there's a lot of other things about that.
Yeah,
Diamond
pencil,
rocks.
You pick it up and it works.
That's the next product. I'm so hyped for that.
I have a whole nother one that I have to wait until we're done to show both of you that you're both going to love, but I'm not going to talk about it on here, but remind me when we're done.
I feel like I might have to cut out the whole diamond rock idea just so nobody else steals it.
Just so nobody hears it.
Yeah. Because that solves a huge problem that exists today. And I know a lot of people like doing outside home audio, especially more and more people hanging out at their homes nowadays, post-COVID, Diamond rocks. Love it.
I expect a 2-cent royalty for each one.
So we all caught up? Are we all caught up to today?
I mean, what else?
Yeah, I can't think of anything on my end that I want to talk about. I think that's it. You guys know more than anybody else about what goes on in here right now.
Well, the world's going to know shortly. So
yeah. Yeah, my competitors will be tuned in.
Yeah.
They know that we don't have a big budget over here, that we're pretty small. We've got about 7 people working here in total. So,
but you also don't have to deal with a lot of politics, right? If you want to build some cool shit, you just build it, right? Like you have the chops to build it, and you don't have to go through this big, long array of getting a project greenlighted. You just fucking, if you think it's cool, you build it. Right, so I think that's the big difference between
you go home, you crawl into bed with your breadboard, and you make shit happen.
Yeah, one of my mentors, the guy that I worked for in Seattle, that was one of his things that he came to visit me once I started my own company, and I thought it was super cool what we had going on. And I know one of the things he told me was like that when you're small, there's certain things you can't do, but there's things you can do. And one of those things you can do is speed to market. He's like, I don't know if I'd worry about trying to patent this or that. He's like, just get it out there first and start selling them before anybody does. And that was a piece of advice that has stuck with me, even though we have been patenting the things that we've been making. I do have another thing that's patent pending. Doesn't have a patent yet. This is the most secret thing maybe at the moment. Maybe not the biggest idea at the moment, but it's the most untalked about thing that I can see in my office right now. We are making a speaker protector. And it's patent pending. It's been patent pending for a year already. And the idea of this thing is, can I plug this? Is this okay?
Oh yeah. We're getting world exclusive right here.
There's no limits on this podcast. There's zero limits.
So
we've gone 4 hours before, just to tell you.
Yeah, I'm waiting for my wife to be like, "Where are you?" So speaker protector. So traditionally, like tweeters are what typically need the most protecting, or maybe they're just the easiest to protect. I guess it's both. They blow up easily, and they're also fairly easy to protect. But how have we done it in the past? So we do, the light bulb thing, which that kind of works because a light bulb, the resistance goes up as it gets hot. So when they're cold, they basically aren't there. So your 4-ohm tweeter is still 4 ohms, but as they start to get hot and glow, the resistance goes up and up and up, and your tweeter's 50 ohms, so you cannot get too much power to it. That works. They're kind of slow to react. You can still blow up tweeters if you try hard enough, and you can blow the light bulbs up pretty easily. I used to pop them all the time in my Rockford Q series stuff. I had to keep like a bunch of them on my center console. Then you have the resettable fuses. Those ones I just hate, especially in Arizona, because those are heat based. They get hot enough, then they just open. So your tweeters just turn off, right? And then if they cool down, eventually they turn back on. Those are annoying as fuck. And here in Arizona, they activate prematurely all the time. So that's kind of what we've had. So I wanted to make something smart, not a light bulb or just a fuse, like something that actually has a brain that's monitoring what's going on, that you can tell it, I want 9 watts to my tweeter, and that's it. So I made this device that I'm calling it, the patent calls it the closed loop something or other. And it's because it closes a loop between your speaker and your amplifier. Right now there is no loop. It's just open. The amp just connects to the speaker. That's it. If the speaker says, ouch, the amp doesn't know about it. So this device closes that loop. So your speaker wire goes to your speaker as usual, but then your speaker wire also goes to this widget to monitor what's happening at the speaker. So that's one part of the loop, is monitoring what's happening. The part of really closing it is that the RCAs coming from your head unit or your source or whatever, your DSP, whatever it is, instead of going to the amp, they first go to the widget and then they go to the amp. So when the widget is not active, because the power that's going to the speaker that's being monitored is less than the power that you've told the widget that you want to limit it at, it is totally inert and does nothing. But if the power level going to the speaker exceeds what you've set it to, then it modifies the signal going to the amp at the RCA level. So it basically attenuates at the RCA level. So with that, and it's microprocessor controlled, right? There's a little computer in there running really fast. So it does this like super fast, tens of thousands of times a second. So and since it has a microprocessor, I can program it for a bunch of different scenarios and actually give it some like AI, if you will. That's such a buzzword right now. You can give it some intelligence. So like if you set it to 10 watts, it's all you want to go to your tweeter, and it sees 13 watts. It doesn't turn off your tweeter because that's annoying. It just lowers it to 10 watts. Yeah. And it's so subtle that you don't even really notice. If you're listening to music and it's like activating and turning off and activating, the music is not sounding like that at all. It's very subtle and smooth. It's really cool, actually. But if it sees like 100 watts all of a sudden, because I don't know,
because your DSP reset, or
yes. Yeah, I hear Andy Weimar talk about that. He's like, these DSPs blowing up speakers all the time, and they freak out. And so if that happens, then yeah, it says, holy crap, 100 watts. That's 10x where I want it to be, mute and monitor and wait and see. Did that go away? Okay, we can turn back on now, or maybe it's not, it's not a hard mute. It's a instant 10 dB down or whatever. So there's a lot of programming that I do in the code to make it react different ways for different events. But this thing, since it works at the RCA level, like the activities happening there, it can be any power level you want to, which couldn't be done before. So if you have a 5,000 watt subwoofer and you want to limit it to 5,000 watts because you're just going to rail it, or someone else is going to demo it and every knob's going to the right, you can limit it to 5,000 watts. It's just going to modify.
That's savvy.
That's awesome.
So
that's another one you could theoretically license to somebody to build into a DSP or something like that too.
Home amp,
Dude,
it's like
so
touring
silly.
amps, home amps.
So what you're saying is Diamond Rocks is super easy to build.
With protection built in.
I'm so excited to get mine. I'm going to come up. I'm going to draw some concept art and send them to you. Steve Mead will have his tools. I'll have my Diamond Rocks. We could sell so many of those.
Yeah.
Each person gets
Probably.
what, 4? At least 2. You're not buying just one.
Yeah. Disneyland.
You need
has
the
Oh
a
my
lot.
need
God.
the
That's where you got to
need
think big.
the big ass rock is the subwoofer version.
Yeah. Dual 21-inch rock.
There you go. Okay, so we worked the waterfall pump into it, so it's a rock fixture that's configurable, dual 21-inch woofers with the waterfall built in, and
How dope would
the
that be?
water can pulsate and light
Especially
up. To the
by a
music.
pool, you could have so many different ones that stack on each other.
We're just going to need like a really big ass solar panel, though. Really big. People have asked me before, why don't you just put a solar panel on the dime box and then you can just like play forever?
Yeah, no.
Okay, well, the top of the dime box, if the whole thing was a solar panel, it's like 10 watts in direct sunlight in like summer.
But what you could do, Matt, you know this, I don't know, but what's the low voltage lighting in a backyard? Is it like 5 volts or something?
No, it's 12 volt.
Is it 12 volt? So what if you could tap into low voltage lighting with that thin wire, use the step up technology with the batteries, and you just have to grab the lighting buried wire
There you go. You just use your
as an option
12 volt
for upgrade.
transformer for
That could
12 volt
work.
lighting.
That's
and
charging
that goes
it like
to
a-
one diamond rock. That goes to the master diamond rock. And then from there, that disperses everything to everywhere. There's something here. And I feel like we got to talk about this some other time.
I installed like a ring alarm at my dad's house with like a doorbell camera, and I believe that doorbell camera has a battery in it, and it powers from the old school doorbell electricity. Like it charges.
I have it. Never have to touch it.
Yeah, it's pretty cool.
Yep, it's not bad. It is getting late, Matt. It is midnight where you're at. Do you need to call it? Or are you still good?
I should probably wrap it up over here.
Yeah, he's trying to get his board ready for the fucking
gonna
diamond
go.
rock.
Yeah.
He's like, there's something here.
Yeah, I gotta
If
get
you want to
Gotta make
pre-order
some
your
phone
diamond
calls.
rocks now, just call this 800 number.
We need a Kickstarter.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I guess the solar panel doesn't have to be part of the speaker, right? It could be its own installation.
It could. The other option too would be just like that Ring camera has those replaceable battery packs. You could also, for if you needed to, have a quick lift it up, swap the battery in.
If we can make it like a Mr. Fusion from Back to the Future, we just open it up, don't crash in it, turn
That's
that into
As long as
Perfect.
the main base can be plugged in by an outlet or a power supply, right? Because mostly everyone has at least one outlet out there. If you can plug the main thing into that one spot, and then you can transmit the audio to all the speakers, and then each speaker has your battery patent technology. There's something there. I know you can figure it out. You're a fucking smart guy.
You know, Tesla had this idea of like wireless power, you know,
Pulling it out of the air. Yep.
powers
Yep.
and stuff. That's what this needs.
Yeah. A couple stakes in the ground somehow. I don't know.
You just can't, you know, keep your kids away from it. But
Yeah. Oh man.
Well, this was fun.
Yeah. This was pretty
definitely
cool.
fun.
yeah, I appreciate you guys for inviting me to do this with you.
I'm glad you made some
Yeah,
time.
this is,
We've been
this
wanting
is
to have you on for a while
awesome.
now. So
Thanks. Yeah, it was cool.
All right. I'm gonna turn this off and say goodbye. I'm not leaving yet though. I
All
have
right.
stuff to show you guys.
All right.